Last week we were starting chapter 5. We're a little bit further in chapter 5 here now. We're going to be in chapter 5, 7 to 12. And the question you've got, if you got a sheet, you can also follow along on YouVersion. But if you look at the sheet next to you or that was in your chair, the question today is, how can I learn to be patient? And this is one of those things that sometimes it's not the easiest thing. You know, like we're coming up on Christmas, and so there's going to be presents under the tree, and there's going to be kids running around, and they're going to want to see what's in there. They're going to be all excited about it, when Santa coming, stuff like that. Anybody who's ever taken a ride with somebody know what impatience looks like, because you hear the question, what? Are we there yet? Again and again. And even like my own daughter, Hannah, she forgot her watch yesterday, and she was all upset about it. I'm like, well, just ask me what time it is. I'll tell you. You know, like I have a watch. That was a dumb idea. Because it was like, what time is it? And I'd tell her, and then like 5 minutes, she has no place to go, no appointment to make or anything like that. 5 minutes later, what time is it? So anyway, if you ever see her without her watch, steer clear unless you know what time it is. But talking about patience, this reminds me of, like I've told some stories about my lovely bride before. I'm going to tell another one, so you can go ahead and cringe. Because she is so efficient. Okay? Like, the other day, I took out a spoon, and I set it down because I was getting a bowl, and I was going to have some ice cream, and I got my ice cream, and I was going to eat it, and I went to grab my spoon, and it wasn't there because my wife had already cleaned it up. She just happened to walk through the kitchen and noticed that there was a spoon out of place, and so she made sure that it found its place in the dishwasher. And so this is an ongoing problem that she's dealt with, to the point that my kind way of saying, honey, you need to just slow down a little bit. It's okay. Be patient. Is I would call her my little flower. I said, it's okay, my little flower. And she would look at me, and it took her about a week and a half or 2 weeks before she realized, I only said it at certain times. And she's like, okay, you keep calling me your little flower, but it also seems like you're a little upset at me or just kind of frustrated. Why are you doing this? I said, no, you're just my little flower. No, tell me. I said, okay, well, there's these little flowers. They're called impatience. And you're my little flower. So, and see, she's not cringing. She smiles because she knows. She knows. The problem with patience, the reason that we get impatient, that's what James is going to be talking about today, is not necessarily because we want something. It's a lot of times because we don't want something. Now, obviously, you get around Christmas and you put a marshmallow out in front of a little kid and say, you know, if you don't eat this for 5 minutes, I'll give you 2 marshmallows, and, you know, some can handle it and some can't. But a lot of times we're impatient in different ways where we just want something to be over. We want it to be done. We want the discomfort to end. We want the pain that's associated with whatever situation we're in to go away. And we'll do anything we can to get out of it. And so, whatever you might be dealing with, maybe we're dealing with some financial situations, some relational situations, job situations, and we're just like, I hate this, I don't like it, I wish it were done. I'll do anything. I'll take any job. I don't need to work here anymore. I'll take anyone. I just don't want to be with my spouse anymore. I'll take any money anyway. I just don't want to be broke. That's another form of impatience. So how can we learn to be patient? Read, if you will, with me, if you got your Bibles, which I encourage, because you need to check me. I am not the all-knowing person. I can read. And sometimes I misunderstand, and so you need to be able to read for yourself and trust that the Holy Spirit of God will speak to you in the same way that I hope He's spoken to me. So James chapter 5, start in verse 7. He says, be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remained steadfast. And have you heard of the steadfastness of Job? And you've seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. But above all, my brothers, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. And so he's saying, be patient, be patient, be patient. He's going to give some examples and stuff. If you don't take anything else away, you can quit taking notes at this point. Just keep this, file it away, repeat it numerous times, because you're going to find yourself in situations you want to get out of. And you're impatient. But God might be trying to work something in you instead of working you out of it. And until it's worked in, you cannot get out. So keep this in mind. Write this down. I think what James is telling us is that we know that tomorrow's hope, this is how we start with patience. Tomorrow's hope is what's going to enable me to endure today's hurt. It's the hope for tomorrow that's going to enable me to endure today's hurt. So you can look, we've got people that are kind of gimpy around here. We've got Ralph in the back, and Ralph is hurt. You got, he can't use his arm. We got Hazel, she was hurt. Last week they were a pair. We've got Hannah running around, she's hurt. We got, you're probably hurt too. We're all getting old. Except Macy, she's young. But we endure the hurt because we know that there's a hope tomorrow. So let me just kind of give you an example. I'm kind of hurting. Tyler and I were talking. Tyler didn't even sleep last night very well, and I've gotten better about this. Okay, but if you don't know, I'm just going to let you in on a little bit, and you can hopefully not make fun of me. I really like this group of Catholics called Notre Dame. Okay? And they were supposed to play a football game yesterday, but they sent somebody else. And so they got, demolished, these imposters. It was horribly ugly and depressing and demeaning and in the past, I'd be like Tyler. I would literally lie in bed and I would stare up into the darkness and I would feel my heart beating and I might make it 15 or 20 minutes and then I'd get up and I'd pace around the house and I'd be so mad at the stupid plays and the stupid calls and all that kind of stuff. And so at some point, Tyler, you will grow out of it. Chandler, you hope you will grow out of it too. But the reason that I'm able to is I understand this, that tomorrow's hope allows me to endure today's hurt. And this is a stupid thing, but I know that this is just a setback. In other words, this isn't the last time Notre Dame's ever going to play football. It's definitely not the last loss they're ever going to have. It's certainly not going to be that they never win another football game. So I'm looking forward to another hope. And I say that because that's not the end. And what we're going to look at here in James is that James is pointing a whole lot of people, and he's pointing them to Jesus, and he's saying, there's some hope. And it's because when you're looking at Jesus, you realize it's not the end. Now, it may look like it's been the end sometimes, because even when Jesus was here, he ended up dead. Oh, well, that's a bad thing. And people were hurting. But that's not where it ends. And so, know that tomorrow's hope. I'm just going to keep pointing you to Jesus. Tomorrow's hope will enable you to endure today's hurt. Because Jesus hasn't returned yet, but he will. And sometimes we forget about that. So let's start verse 7, 8, and 9. Okay? He says, be patient. He's going to say be patient a few times. Be patient, therefore, my brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it, until it receives the early and the late rains. And you also be patient, establishing your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Don't grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. So let me just tell you a little bit about patient. I didn't know a lot about this, but this particular word, it means a patient waiting, but also an ability to absorb difficult or irritating things or people. Okay, anybody have any difficult or irritating things or people? Maybe sitting next to you? Okay, now don't let anybody else around you know. Like, don't nod or, don't give it away. All right, Jess, this lesson's for you. Okay, how you can learn to be patient. Because one guy put it this way. He says, this patience, this idea means to stay put and stand fast when you'd like to run away. Okay, and so this is what we're talking about. If you want to be patient, there's a few lessons that we're going to look at. If you want to be able to stand firm and stand fast when you'd like to run away, there's a couple examples. The first one is he's going to tell you about this farmer. Okay, so we're going to try and learn something from the farmer. Now, what do we learn from the farmer? Well, we learn that he waits. The farmer waits. He waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. Is that all the farmer does? Is that how the farmer's patient? Like, the farmer just sits there and he waits. That's all no. Does anybody, have you ever been around a farmer? Like, farmers don't wait. Farmers don't even sleep. Like, just to plant the fields that we go by. Okay, they need to plow them up. So that's one trip around. They need to plant them up. So that's another trip around. Then they need to pick it up. So that's another trip around. So these fields, they're not just something that, the farmer can just go, well, it's there. It's going to happen. I can just wait for the rain. No. Farmers work. A lot of times they actually go in between the planting and the picking, and they throw out some, bug killer, weed killer. I remember growing up in Minnesota. I think I may have told you guys this before. Like, my parents, we lived in like St. Paul, and then my dad wanted to move out to the country because he kind of grew up in the country. And so when I was like in second grade, we moved out to the country. So we had 45, 50 acres, a couple ponds. That's where I always hunted, riding four-wheeler and stuff. And they wanted to have a garden. So we had two gardens. One garden was about as big as this room. And that's where regular dinner stuff. And then we had another garden that was, about as big as that area. That was just potatoes and corn. Okay, crazy. So I'm thinking, that's great, Dad. Have a garden. Sounds like fun. Have at it. That's not what my dad thought. No. So my dad treated me like a farmer. My dad had me come out, and he did the hard work because, second graders don't do real well with rototillers. Okay? So my dad goes out there, and he's just rototilling this thing, and he tears it all up. And then he has me come out there, and my brother, and we have hoes and rakes, and we have to get the rocks and the roots and all that kind of stuff up. So it's just nice dirt. And then he gives us little packets of seed, little burpee seeds. That's the brand. And here's what you got to do. And you plant them. And so, this whole flipping dirt pile, which you think a little boy would be excited about. But after about 3 hours, and you're not even halfway through planting, you're like, I don't care if I starve. So you just keep putting food out there, putting seeds in and stuff, and then you look at it and you're like, nothing's happening. And you wait. And then the first thing to grow, if you've ever gardened, the first thing to grow is what? Weeds, exactly, weeds and grass. So what do? You have to go out and tend the garden. Okay, I thought the farmer just sat there, just waited for the rains to come and the fruit. Fruits come and rain, just sit. Farmer waits. It's not what a farmer does. To the point that my parents, when we lived, we had a big old long driveway, a couple driveways that went up, and one to the barn, one to the house. And he wanted fruit trees, and so he planted fruit trees knowing that you just have to wait. You plant these things, and it's going to be at least 3 years before you can have any apples or plums or whatever it is you planted. But you got to plant them, and you got to water them, and you got to make sure that they don't die or they just turn into sticks. I can do that. But farmers don't wait. So what do we learn from the farmer? I said learn from the farmer, but what do we learn from the farmer? If you're taking notes, write this down. We learn that hope is not something that is passive. Tomorrow's hope that helps you to endure today's hurt is not something that you just sit there and go, oh, I hope things get better. Oh, I hope I make it through. No, it's not passive. There's work to be done. And I want you to notice something that he says in each of these verses. In verse 7, he says, be patient until when? until the coming of the Lord. In verse 8, he says, be patient. Why? Well, the coming of the Lord is at hand. Verse 9. What's he saying? We don't want you to grumble. We don't want, I know it's hard, but why should you behave? Why should you press on in this patience? The judge is standing at the door. Okay, so if we're going to learn from the farmer and hope is not passive, well, the Lord is coming. The judge is standing at the door. Let me give you an example. When I was in 4th grade, I had a crush on this girl. I can't remember her name right now. Okay, I don't know how they do it now, but where I was, we were at a school where, the 4th graders, we were actually upstairs, and there were only 4 classrooms up there, and then they would call over the loudspeaker whose bus was there. So if you're on A bus, B bus, whatever, I don't even remember how they did it, but I just remember them talking. And the teacher would stand at the door so she could hear, and then she would call in. So the judge is standing at the door, and then the little 4th grade boys are running around in the room. And you need to beware because it was an old place that they used to heat with a furnace and a fireplace. And in the upstairs, there was this access to the fireplace where little boys could go in, and if you could get enough pressure against the wall, you could shimmy up that sucker behind the wall where nobody could see you, including the teacher. But you had to do it without anybody knowing because if everybody's staring at the hole in the wall and the teacher's staring in the room, it's kind of a dead giveaway. So what do? You just kind of, oh, I dropped something. And then you go over there and quick climb in the hole and then try and climb up while the judge is standing at the door. Well, I had a hope that I would be able to make it to the top because guys who made it to the top, you put a rock up there. Okay? And I didn't know how many rocks were up there because nobody would ever tell, So you just kind of have to shimmy and put a rock up there. I had a hope. But my hope wasn't passive, it's not like anybody was ever going to load a ladder in there and say, hey, son, if you'd like to take a trip before you move out of 4th grade, just climb on up. I'm not going to do that. And I tried to do it while the judge was standing at the door. And I'll just cut to the chase. I got busted. I never made it, and I got in trouble, and that's the way it works. Well, that's a pretty sad story. But I'm telling you that because the lesson that we can learn from the farmer, that hope isn't passive, there's an active. It teaches us something because Jesus isn't going to disappoint. Here's what it teaches us about Jesus. Jesus is coming. The coming of the Lord is at hand. The judge is standing at the door. Jesus is coming. And so the lesson we can learn from the farmer is that whatever you're facing right now, whatever you need to stand firm and stand up and face and not run away, you can do that. That's called patience as well. You can endure these things because Jesus is coming and we should expect it and be ready for it. Now, it might be hard, but Jesus is coming. And if we can get excited about what's coming in, 6 weeks, Santa, I know him. Movie reference is? Thank you very much. If you haven't seen it, it's on your Christmas list. But if we can get excited about that, why in the world do we not get excited about Jesus? Because Jesus is coming. And we should expect it. And so that's one of the reasons that we should be patient. And we learn to be patient by looking at the farmer who understands that hope isn't passive. And it doesn't have to be because Jesus is coming. Just like the farmer knows, fruit's coming. I can't just sit here, but fruit's coming. I'm going to pick it. I'm going to eat it. And we did. Does anybody know what kohlrabi is? A few of you do, older folks. Kohlrabi is like a non-spicy radish. Yeah, I used to have to eat that. Anyway, look it up. I don't know why I said that. Bad memories. Oh, I planted it. I think about this now, and I'm like, why in the world, if I had to tend the garden, did I not just accidentally chop the roots? Like, what? Man, so stupid. I could have fixed it. Anyway. Because that wouldn't be good. All right, verse 10. I'd have blamed my brother. He'd have believed me. My dad would have believed me. My brother would have thrown rocks at me. Wow. I was patient. for a hope that enabled me to... Anyway, so we're going to stop. Verse 10. Verse 10. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Okay, so we've looked at the farmer and how he did things. Now we're going to learn from the prophets. So, what do we learn from the prophets? Well, we learned that they weren't just patient. They didn't just sit there like the farmer. They actually had to suffer. Be patient. Establish your hearts. Whoops, that's verse 8. As an example of suffering and patience. An example of suffering and patience. These prophets had to suffer. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about the prophets. Let me just give you a couple of them, okay? Anybody know much about Elijah? Elijah was a prophet talked about in Kings. And Elijah was the guy that the king wanted to kill, and so he was wandering around. He thought all the rest of the prophets were dead, and he was the only one. And there was a famine going on, no rain. It was basically a drought for at least 3 years, and he's the guy who has to deliver the news. And so nobody likes him, and he has to get fed by a bird. Sounds like a good deal, right? I mean, anybody'd sign up for that if you put it in a job description and you had to, post it at whatever the latest job thing was back then, profitjobs.com. I'd prefer to, have people who want to kill me and have to eat from a bird that delivers my food. That would be kind of cool. But that was Elijah. And then there's, Daniel. You guys, we actually went through Daniel not too long ago. Daniel's a guy who, we think he's a great guy, but the poor little dude was taken away from his family as a slave. So he's got no family. And, his buddies get sent into his furnace and they think they're going to die, but God comes through. He gets stuck into a lion's den and, the king thinks he's going to die, but God comes through. People are out to try and get him in trouble, but God comes through. But he didn't exactly have an easy way. Jeremiah got chucked into a well. Hey, dude, just die. They left him there. Nobody liked him. They call him the weeping prophet. Like that's kind of the name for him. Ezekiel had to cook his dinner over poop. That's kind of gross. So, like these guys didn't exactly, and those are just the ones people kind of listen to. A little. But we know that all the prophets were just, they didn't have it easy. But why were they able to do what they did? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But the problem, or at least the cool thing is that the prophets, what can we learn from them? Too many of us think that if we show up and we start following Jesus, everything's going to be good, and it's not. Because this hope that we have in a future does not guarantee that there will be no pain. Okay? The prophets had a hope that people would listen, but it didn't guarantee that everything would be great. There's people that go into Christianity, that go into ministry, that start trying to live for Jesus. When we switched over to elders, we talked to all the guys who were on the eldership and said, hey, look, guys, we're making this shift. It's not just a leadership directional group. It's like we're going to be elders, and Satan's coming for us. And he has. And it's not because they're bad guys. It's because the hope that we have in something better, in a tomorrow, does not guarantee that we will be pain-free. Now, when we were here last week, wasn't it last week? When we were at worship, this thing happened in Texas. It's only been 1 week. A guy walks into a church in Texas and starts shooting. Kills 26 people. Shoots 20 others. Neighbor guy hears the shots and he grabs his rifle, runs out barefooted, sees the guy come out and he shoots him. Doesn't kill him. Sees another guy who's watching it all unfold. Could you imagine that? You're a guy sitting in your truck and you hear this and you're stopped and you see one guy walk out barefoot, shoot at another guy walked out of the church with a gun, wearing body armor and a mask. And you're like, but the guy at bare feet with a gun gets in the guy's truck and says, we need to follow him after the guy who was shooting up the church took off. And so they follow him. They're going 90 some miles an hour, and they finally catch up. Long story short, that guy's the guy who shot people, killed himself, and 26 other people. And I've heard and I've seen the conversation that's gone around in social media and on the news and stuff, which is, okay, where was God? Like, these people are in church and they're praying, and God didn't answer their prayers, so why in the world would I want to follow a God like that? He didn't do anything to stop it. Now, it's a legitimate question when stuff like that happens. The problem is, people don't like the answer. People don't like the answer. The answer isn't that God didn't do anything. The answer is in a hope for tomorrow, not the hurt of today. And people think that if we could just avoid the hurt of today, then we don't need a hope for tomorrow. And so when we can't avoid the hurt of today, we go, well, it's all God's fault. I'm not going to believe in him. He's never come through. He's let me down. My family member who had cancer died, and I prayed for him. You know, I said, God, if you'll just save them, I'll live this way, I'll do this. And he didn't, and so I don't owe him anything. It's the wrong way of looking at it. Absolutely the wrong way of looking at it, because the lesson that we learn from the prophets is that the hope that we have for tomorrow does not guarantee that we will have no pain. In 1 Peter chapter 5, I put down verse 10, which says this, "And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you." That sounds like a pretty good guarantee, right? That God, who's the God of all grace, and he's called you and me, all of us, he's called all of us to eternal glory. Some have said yes, some have said, I'm still thinking about it. But he's called all of us to eternal glory. And he himself, God himself, will restore whatever it is that's been busted and broken. He will confirm whatever it is that you've doubted. He will strengthen wherever you've been weak. And he will establish you so that you can never backslide again. Like, that's a pretty good hope for tomorrow. But it comes after what? After you've suffered a little while. And just, if you have your Bible, you might want to look back a couple of verses, because here's what it's talking about starting in verse 8. It says, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him. Resist him. Firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of sufferings are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world." So patience isn't getting out of all the bad stuff. We need patience to stay in the bad stuff. When your marriage is falling apart, when your finances look horrible, when your house is being foreclosed on, when your grades aren't where you want them, where your relationship's just completely tanked, where people hate you, where everybody's accusing you and saying things about you and your reputation's ruined, when you've got some bad habits, some hang-ups, some stupid addiction that you just can't break, well, be sober-minded. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. But stand firm. Stand firm. Because after you've suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore and confirm and strengthen and establish you. And so, what does the farmer remind us of? He reminds us that hope isn't passive and Jesus is coming. And the prophet reminds us that hope doesn't guarantee no suffering, but it also reminds us that Jesus came. The prophet reminds us that Jesus came. Jesus is coming again, but Jesus also came, and Jesus was able to do exactly what he's asking us to do. So follow his example. See, Jesus was able to suffer with patience, not answer when he was accused, not fight back when he was arrested, because he knew that tomorrow's hope was enough to endure today's hurt. And so that's what we can learn from the prophet. And go to verse 11. "Now behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast," and you've heard you've heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you've seen the purpose of the Lord, and how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. And so, we've learned from the farmer, we've learned from the prophet. Now we're going to learn a little something from Job. Okay? But more accurately, I think I'd probably say what we're going to learn isn't anything about Job. We're going to learn something from the story of Job. Because what we're going to learn is more about God. Because unlike the farmer who waited until the end, and then he gets fruit, unlike the prophet who waited until the end, where God does what God's going to do, he's just the message bearer. They waited because they knew the end was coming. Job's this innocent guy in the middle of a storm, and he doesn't know what the heck is happening. A prophet was called, and he says, hey, you need to go deliver this message, and you'll deliver it until they either listen or you die. The farmer plants, and he knows you're either going to sit there and live until you can pick it, or you're going to die. Like, they know what the end is. Job doesn't know when the end's coming. He just thinks, I'm going to die. And for no understanding, no purpose. So Job's not the hero of this story. So what do we learn from the story of Job? You've probably heard of him, but the point of the story is this, that hope comes from understanding God's purpose. And Job didn't have a whole lot of hope early on because Job didn't understand what God's purpose was. And we see in the verse here, you and I have seen the purpose of the Lord, not just in our lives, but in the story of Job. We've seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. And sometimes we forget that in the middle of the stuff we want to get out of, that we're impatient about enduring, sometimes we forget that God has a purpose. And sometimes we need a reminder. And so, I'm just going to tell you, I needed a reminder. And you guys, thank you very much, gave it to me. So, a few weeks ago, it was October, and it was the last weekend in October, and it was Pastor Appreciation Month, and you guys rocked it. Kim, thank you for coordinating and organizing that. Because in the 11, 12 years that we've been here, it's probably, at least in my opinion, the most heartfelt, meaningful Pastor Appreciation that we've had since we've been here. And we've been given nice gifts, we've been given trips and stuff like that. It's great. But this was, in my opinion, the nicest one. Why? Because it reminded me, and it gave me some hope in understanding God's purpose. Because what you guys did is you didn't just fill 2 bags with some gifts, like Oreos and candy and stuff like that, and gift certificates and $100 bills. Thank you, thank you. But the best part was at the bottom of it, where you guys wrote notes and letters, and people who had been at Discover Here aren't here sent in messages, and they got typed up and stuck in envelopes saying, thank you. Here's what we love about you guys and your family or the church or what you guys have done for us or whatever. Like Laura and I just sat there and read it, and I don't know what she was thinking. We still haven't even really talked about it. We just have the whole stack of them sitting on our kitchen table. I don't know how she was feeling, but I was looking at it and going, this is why we're here. When things are hard, because, let's face it, anything that we try and do in life is going to be hard. Marriage is hard. Jobs are hard. Kids are hard. School is hard. Church is hard. Sometimes we just need a reminder. And I was reminded, this is why we're here. This is why we do it. This is why we do it. So, from the bottom of my heart, I'm assuming Laura's too, and the rest of my family, thank you for just reminding us why we do it. I don't love you guys because I have to. Well, maybe some of you. Just kidding. I love you guys because God has called me to. And the hope comes from understanding God's purpose. God sent me here for a reason, to start a church. And when I moved here, I thought it was going to be something completely different. Like we were going to be Ignite. Okay? And now we're like the redheaded stepchild meeting in Ignite's office building. And I'm okay with that. Because I know I'm here. And I know that God is still working. That Jesus is coming. That Jesus came. And that Jesus comforts. Jesus comforts. And how do we know this from the story of Job? Well, look what happens. Job gets everything taken away. He loses his kids. He loses his riches. He loses everything. He almost loses his wife, who says, Job, are you still holding on to your integrity? Just curse God and die. What a lovely lady. But he doesn't. And at the end, he gets all of it back and more. Because the Lord is compassionate and merciful. Jesus comforts. And so how does he do it? Well, he sees what you're going through. God knew, in the purpose of God, he knew what Job was going through. Does it say? What? That's awesome. That's awesome. Somebody needs to video this. Like we can just have a baby throwdown. I think Cat's bigger, though. Totally different weight class. Totally different weight class. Yeah, exactly. It'll be even. But Job didn't know what was going on, but God did, and he understood his purpose. And so his compassion says, I know what you're going through. You're not alone. I haven't left you. I know what you're going through. That's how God is compassionate. He's not going to leave you. Jesus came, and Jesus is coming. At the same time, he is merciful, and he will make things better. Now, I don't know what that looks like. Not everybody gets everything better on this side. They don't turn out like Job, where everything goes to pot, and then it gets better before you die. Some of us, we're just going to die. My wife works with people who die. She's a hospice nurse, and things are not going to get better for them. Or are they? Like, this is what we need to discern. Do we have a hope in tomorrow that enables us to deal with the hurt of today? Or are you missing out on hope? Because hope doesn't guarantee that there's no pain. Hope is not a passive thing where you just sit there and wait. Hope comes from understanding God's purpose. So then we get this last verse, verse 12, which seems like, how does this even fit in? I don't know what it's talking about. It says, but above all, my brothers, don't swear either by heaven or by earth or by any oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. And we know that it's easy to say things that you don't mean when you're stuck in a situation you don't want to be in. We make bargains with God. I've told you this story before where I found out I had a test. I think I was like in 7th grade. And I was one of those guys who actually kind of liked to do well in school. So yeah, nerd. But I found out I had a test and I hadn't studied for it, and it was right after band. And so I remember praying, dear God, I promise, I don't even know what I promised to do, but it was a biggie. If Mr. Linval is gone, and Mr. Linval, in the 2 years I'd been at that school, had been gone never. So, Mr. Linval, if he's not there, then I can study because we'll have a substitute for band, and then I can at least pass this test. Guess who was gone? And it was at that moment I gave my life to Jesus, and I started living for him. No, I should have. I should have. But a lot of times we make bargains and we do things we want to get out of it. I was impatient. I needed something. And when we do that, I didn't live up to my end of the bargain. I made a little oath, hey, God, if Mr. Linval will be gone, I'll do this. And it was another 7 or 8 years before I finally said, I should do this. I lied. And we see what he says is let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you don't fall under condemnation. Do we know anybody who was not condemned? Very good. See, this is the answer. When you're in church, if somebody asks a question, the best answer is usually Jesus. Jesus was not condemned. So we have learned from the farmer and the prophet and Job, but we need to learn from Jesus. And what do we learn from Jesus? Well, Jesus said basically the same thing in Matthew chapter 5. He said, but I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's the throne of God, or by earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head. You cannot make one hair white or black. And then in verse 37 of Matthew chapter 5, he says this, let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Well, what do we learn from Jesus? Did Jesus sit there when he was talking to the people and saying, hey, I'm going to prepare a place for you. I swear. No. Did Jesus sit and talk to Peter and make a promise? I swear on Jerusalem, I swear on Mother Mary that this will happen, that I'm giving you the keys of the kingdom. No, he didn't say that. He didn't make an oath. He didn't swear by his head. He just let his yes be yes and his no be no. And guess what? Because he did that, he was under no condemnation. He endured no condemnation from God himself. Because he just said, yes, I will return. Yes, I will never leave you or forsake you. I'm coming. I came. A comfort. We need to learn from Jesus. And if those things are true, then you and I need to make this choice, which is this. We need to commit. We need to decide if we're going to commit to stay the course. And the course is one where everything in us says, I wish I could just get out of this. I'm so uncomfortable. I can't stand this. But the patience that we're talking about says, nope, you can't go. You can, but then you'd just be impatient. You wouldn't be very steadfast. You wouldn't be able to endure. You wouldn't stand up. You'd run away. And when I hear that, the picture I have in my mind, if anybody's ever seen Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail, they run away. That's what I see. And that's what people who just bail look like in my head. Things get rough, things get tough, things get uncomfortable. Nobody likes it. But Jesus is coming. Are we acting like the judge is at the door, like the Lord is going to return? Or are we just like, oh man, I need to take care of this right now? Jesus is not here. No, Jesus is coming. Jesus also came. And whatever you're going through, Jesus will comfort. He did it for Job. We can learn that from him. He was compassionate and merciful. So, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to bail? Are you going to check out? Are you going to leave your marriage? You're going to leave your job? You're going to leave your church? You're going to leave your friends? You're going to leave your school? You're going to leave your roommates? Whatever it is, you're going to leave? Because you can. But if you want to learn from what James is talking about, we need to be patient in suffering. He says it 3 times in the first 3 verses. Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord, because he's coming again. And you can learn from the farmer, and you can learn from the prophets, and you can learn from Job, but we need to learn from Jesus, who committed to stay the course regardless of what happened, because he had a hope in tomorrow that allowed him to endure the hurt of today. And so we don't give up on God because we know that he's never, ever, ever going to give up on us. Patience means standing firm, staying put when everybody else wants to run away. So don't run, because Jesus is coming. Jesus came. Jesus comforts. And he's the hope that will enable you to endure whatever hurt that you're facing. Now, I hope that's hopeful. I hope there's something encouraging about that, because Jesus isn't just a story. He's not just a name that we use and use a little bit more now that we're close to Christmas. He is a man who came because you and I needed somebody to come. And he's a man who said, I'm coming back because you and I need somebody to put an end to all the stuff that we're dealing with. And who can restore us and confirm us and establish us, like we were talking about. And so if you don't have that hope, you need that hope. If you've forgotten about that hope and you've gotten all caught up in the hurts, that's fine, it happens. But let's refocus our hope on Jesus. A hope for tomorrow that enables us to deal with the hurts of today. Let me pray.